pours facts into the empty pitchers called his students. In other words, a very mechanical process. One could argue that in the middle of the 19th century, England was going through an industrial revolution, and they needed individuals to fit the system. So education just was a very mechanical process. And in almost all of Dickens' novels, he has a very negative view of what happens in various schools. Well, fast forward 100 years to the free speech movement at Berkeley in the 1960s. The theme and one emphasis was, as they were wearing these cards, basically computer cards, they said, do not fold, mutilate, or poke this thimble into me. There was the reaction to the war in Vietnam, but more than that, it was a reaction to education, where many people felt they were just being processed into a system to fit the war machine or to fit a corporate goal that did not relate to their individual selves. Well, fast forward another 50 years, and we have the situation with the government funding of No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, Common Core. A lot of problems, no kid to raise kids' scores, but nothing was raised. They were looking to put in, again, a lot of information into the pitchers so that they could teach to the test and raise scores. Not very constructive when you ask the question, what is educational excellence? The progressive movement basically emphasized self-esteem. Help children feel self-esteem. Whether they did anything worthwhile or not, as long as they felt self-esteem, that was a positive thing. It was a reaction to the mechanical view of education. So when we educate people, the word education itself comes from the Latin word educare, to draw out. What are we drawing out? Who is this being? In any subject that you study, you have to ask the question, well, who is this that we're trying to deal with? What is it to be human? And as we look seriously at human beings, as I look at them, we see truth seekers, beauty seekers, love seekers. And the world happens to be truthful, knowable, beautiful, lovable. But what's the challenge? The challenge is making the connections. To liberate that which is within, the positive values that are within, by connecting to the beauty and the truth and the love that's without. But that's where the discipline comes in. That's where the hard part comes in. Because each of us has to work at knowing what is true. Especially in this age, it's very difficult. All kinds of articles about people don't know how to find out what's true, what's false. But when we find something true and good, we really say, yeah, I solved that problem. That's really good. I feel fulfilled. When you hear something beautiful, actually, I didn't realize, I knew that Louis Armstrong made that song about a beautiful day, and I love that song. When I hear Louis Armstrong, I keep playing it over and over again. My wife said, why are you playing this over and over again? It's beautiful. When I hear that song, and if you look and see Louis Armstrong singing that song, it's so moving. You love him, you love the music, and you are able to experience the beauty within and the beauty without. And certainly the world is lovable. People are lovable. We are built for relationship. We're built to relate to each other and to the world. But how? By liberating these ideals within. The truth, the beauty, and the love, we can call it a unification principle, because somehow we have a nature that is truthful, beautiful, loving, but how is it integrated? Well, religious leaders talk about divine love. Other people talk about a unification principle, or heart, as we heard a little earlier. There's some central unifying principle within that allows us to feel whole and healthy and loving and experience the beauty of the world, the truthfulness of things, the joy of solving problems, and the experience of loving another person. So the challenge, again, is to be a value maker and a happy maker in many ways. We experience value as we activate these qualities within ourselves and activate those qualities within the other. So the challenge is constantly working on thought, working on feeling, working on behavior. It's a lifetime problem and a lifetime joy. The challenge of life is that every thought, every feeling, every action has value. So the question is, how much value are we activating or liberating in that way? You know, there's a movement now, very positive, called positive psychology. Professor Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania has written books that emphasize that we have 24 strengths. He's not looking at what's wrong with you, but what's right with you. That within us, there are 24 strengths: empathy, compassion, a sense of imagination, grit, all kinds of qualities that we have within that can be liberated, no matter how young we are. You know, it's interesting, at the school, sometimes a child will fall down and hurt his knee, and another child, 6, 7 years old, will run into the office and get a cold pack without the teacher asking them to do that. There's a sense of empathy with the youngest children. Those of you who mentioned that they're studying psychology, it's very useful to study Abraham Maslow's self-actualization chart, or Erik Erikson's emphasis on how we develop ourselves through various stages. But the youngest child can cut through that. The youngest child can develop a heart, can constantly develop a sense of empathy. The 24 strengths within are a foundation by which we can have activities and exercises by which children develop those qualities. That's what early childhood education ideally is about. We still need to do that in our lives. We have to activate those qualities. When we have a test or whatever, you need to activate perseverance and the grit to overcome difficulty. And when in some of these, I guess, variations of the fortune cookie say on the table, when we have failure, how can we overcome that? Actually, failure is a positive thing. Then you realize what I have to know. So actually, if we are working off of these positive aspects within, we liberate ourselves in terms of value. The second movement connected to the positive psychology movement is that of social emotional learning. What's that all about? Well, we're social and we're emotional, we have to learn. So children have to learn how to be aware of their emotions. I went through college and graduate school and even a little bit of postgraduate school. Nobody ever asked me, how are you feeling? Isn't that interesting? I mean, I've been in 1,000 classes, nobody ever asked me, how are you feeling? Some days, you know, I'm not feeling well. And as a student, and you don't work well when you're not feeling well. Same thing as a teacher. You know, I'm a religious person, so when I drive to school, I pray for every child in school. Please with Alina and Anunchka and I go through them in my mind so my heart can be open to them, especially when I'm down-spirited. I have to work at loving those children. Well, teachers have to learn how to do that. It's not a simple thing. You have to learn how to deal with the troublemakers. Instead of making more trouble, how do you really love them and care for them in such a way that you liberate the social emotional qualities within yourself? So awareness of one's own social emotions, awareness of what you're feeling, managing those emotions, all kinds of techniques, whether it be mindful meditation or interaction of learning relationship development. Mr. Benzo has written an excellent book on that, how to build relations in positive ways. Then how to build good relations based on core values. Again, on that core that seems to unite who we are at best as human beings. So the social emotional relations are based on who we are as human beings, constantly being aware of, this is what I'm feeling. How can I manage this feeling? If I'm angry, how can I manage that in a constructive way? The same thing, if you don't like someone else, how do you overcome that and like them whether you like them or not? In other words, the challenge of life is not to choose who you like and who you don't like. The question of relationship is very important. For example, you know, friendship. We all want friends. So nice, a very friendly place. I'm so happy to come here tonight. And music was beautiful, the food is good, and people are pretty good too. So look at, you know, what do you want in friendship? Most people want things like use or pleasure. And it's nice to be useful with people or pleasurable, but more than that, you want somebody to draw out the best values within you. One of my grandchildren who's at Cal, the Haas School of Berkeley, when she first got there, she said, well, you know, people are always networking. I don't like networking so much. I like to build real relationships. You know, if you go to almost any activity, people are networking. Where are you, and what's your, can I have your card, please? Well, it's okay. It's okay to be successful, but more important is to have friends who draw out your value, your good. You know, now that I'm getting on in life, one of my most pleasing things is that most of my friends are almost 50 years old. Some of them are even older than that. They started when they were 1. Oh, actually, I'm so happy to see people. Recently I had a birthday, and some people who I've known around the country came to, and it's just so good to see them, and I know them, I communicate with them, and today I wrote a birthday card to one of my friends, and wow, it felt so great. I've known these people, and they're such good people, and their children are good people. That's such a satisfying reality. So friendship is not just how can I use you, or how can you be pleasurable to me. The same thing with marriage. The idea of the Iroquois, the Native Americans, came out with this idea of 7 generations. You know where that comes from? They say if you're going to deal with the environment, think about 7 generations down, how this is going to impact your environment. Well, same thing with friends. You meet somebody, well, you've got to think, well, how can I care for this person for the next 7 generations? More important, your wife or husband. You go to Starbucks and someone says, well, why don't you come, yeah, I like you, why don't you come over to my place? And you can respond, well, have you thought about 7 generations from now? Can you imagine? You want to meet somebody and want to love this person? Well, yes, you're very nice and I really like you, but have you thought about 7 generations from now? What our family will look like? That's serious stuff. The tragedy of not dealing with this loving, caring, truth-seeking, beauty-seeking, loving person is that if you don't actualize that, you actually experience the reverse. A long article in the New York Times recently was that there's an epidemic of loneliness. Why are people lonely? Because they're not making contact. And maybe they have been hurt. We all have reasons why we want, it's okay to be alone, but to be lonely in an epidemic kind of way, which is what he was talking about, Nicholas Kristof, is serious. The same thing, if we fail to activate which is the most important values within us, the truth-seeking, beauty-seeking, love-seeking qualities, and connecting to those things with integrity, each discipline. You study English, if you study English, freshman English here at Chabot, what are you talking about? You basically are close reading, critical thinking, evidence-based writing or speaking, and upon that foundation, you come up with something, oh yeah, I solved that problem, that's true. It's very satisfying. But it's a discipline to do that. To teach young children, you got to teach them exactly that, no matter how young they are. So we need to understand how to liberate our values. And the foundation of education is based upon these core ideas or these core values. And that's how you build a life. The idea of building peace starts with me. Starts with me working at every day, how am I directing my feelings? How am I directing my thoughts? Where's my behavior leading me to? Those are the things that are important. Again, the 7 generations, thinking about how will this impact me when I'm later on? It's so hard when you're in college, freshman, sophomore, or you go on to college, to later years. What am I doing? What's my purpose? How do I direct my life? How do I direct that's really the challenge of college. How do I really find what is the deepest within me, rather than just, you can take endless courses and get every A in every course and still feel miserable. So it isn't just the grades. Again, as we heard in this slideshow, there's something fundamental to ourselves, whether it's a divine love or a unification principle or a sense of peace within. Reaching that core and then working at it every day is the challenge. It's not just a university. Every institution within a culture should help develop those qualities. So business is not just doing well, it's doing good. In fact, there's a company that's called 7 Generations. They make really good, clean dishwater and paper that's not doesn't abuse the environment and so forth. You got to think in terms of the environment, 7 generations. Some companies do that. There's more social responsibility with business, but more than that, business involves many stakeholders: the worker, the customer, the environment, and 7 generations. How are you impacting what's happening in those generations? Same thing. We live in a society, a city, we have to learn to be civil. We have to speak words of gentleness rather than abusing other people with our language. It's like poison. If somebody says something bad about another person, that is not a constructive thing. If you think somebody has to improve themselves, well, say, forgive me, but perhaps, you can do this, rather than insulting them. You can't live well in a city. You can't have peace if people are using language to tear other people apart. City planning. You go to Europe or some other parts of the world and you see there are places where older people sit down, they're playing parcheesi or some other game or bocce ball or whatever, and they're talking to each other, elderly people. Berkeley, California is the most radical city in the country, and there's no street furniture. You can't sit down anywhere. There's one bathroom there that is the filthiest thing I've ever seen. But we're human beings. Berkeley, California, this is the standard of enlightenment. You go to Europe and people are sitting down, they're talking to each other. You can go sit in a coffee shop and they don't throw you out. Actually, it's so nice to see in San Leandro. The same 5 guys are there every day when I pass it to about 8:30 in the morning. They're sitting, and I see these guys, they're all older than you want them. They're all in their 80s, it looks like. But they're all having a good time. And they probably only bought one small cup of coffee. And then even when I go home, the same 5 guys are there. Maybe they're homeless people. No, they couldn't be. Got a coffee there. So every institution within a culture, city planning should plan for those kind of things, street furniture. It should have bathrooms and places to sit down. And older people, it's interesting, when I was growing up in Brooklyn, New York, it was a very rich experience. Lots of kids on the street, talking to kids. You always had a game to play and all this kind of stuff. Finally, God bless my family, we became middle class. We had a house in the suburbs with a yard and everything. Nobody was around. We had a grass in the house, and my mom and dad finally working for so many years to get what they wanted. Where is everybody? The old people sort of boxed away. There's no place to come. There's no third place. Even for younger people, you work, you go home, and where's the third place? Starbucks? Pete's? Maybe. But is that really the place where you really want to share your heart to someone else? So every institution within the culture needs to cultivate what it is to be human. Needs to cultivate that truth, beauty, love within. That's the challenge of every discipline. It's not just a challenge of literature or art or whatever, psychology. Well, who's the psychology? This is telling human beings. It is important to read Maslow and self-actualization, but don't get caught up in ego. You can be, oh yeah, I'm working on my self-actualization. The danger is always there that you're just focusing on yourself. The first mountain is your career and so forth, but the second mountain, which you have to develop simultaneously, is developing that core, what Karen Armstrong, a historian of religion, calls compassion. She has people now working on compassionate cities. She's developed a charter of compassion where people are signing this more and more and dedicating themselves. Yes, I want the compassion as the core. I want to develop that. Then what follows is a lot of other things. If you're hitting the main point, then you know why truth is valuable. You know why something is beautiful and can nourish you. You know why you should love, because that's the best that you have to offer. It's interesting. Now, I'm glad that before I leave this planet, I learned something about divine love. My wife has had a stroke for 10 years now. And we used to have little things that you don't like, or this and that. Serve. Just serve. It's almost like you learn in order to serve. It's not a motto of my college. I learned it 80 years too late, but not too late. In other words, just serve. You can make requests if somebody's doing something you don't like, but okay, you make a request, but serve. Doesn't matter. And all of a sudden, all your concepts about, well, I don't like this, or maybe I don't like that, I don't like... No concept. Serve. You learn in order to serve. Why else are you here at Chabot College? So I started with Teddy Roosevelt, and I'll end with Confucius. Confucius said that if you're planting something for a year, plant rice. If you're planting for a decade, plant a tree. If you're planning for posterity, for the future, real future, educate a child. So that's what I think we're about. It starts with early education, but it's never too late. We are alive, we all are here, we have minds, and we sense beautiful things. beautiful dinners and sit out. It's such a lovely evening, beautiful music. That's what we need to do for each other. We need to celebrate each other rather than cut each other down. And then peace is there. We have to claim those victories every day. Like tonight, the ukulele club, you got a victory tonight. The Carp Center, you got a victory tonight. You know, everybody, Erica, you spoke beautifully. You got a victory tonight. You know, these are victories. You got to claim them every day. You do something for somebody who's hurting. So folks who are driving me here from my home, they're going to be a nurse. Man, the nurses that taking care of have unbelievable care and love. Claim a victory. Any act of love that you do, any act of beauty, claim it. You know, you claim those victories, and life becomes a victory. You don't have to worry about what am I going to do 4 years from now, am I going to make the money, the apartments are too expensive. Don't worry about it. If you love somebody, you can live in a small shack and claim a victory because you love the person with whom you're in the shack. So, educate a child, educate ourselves, educate the future. Thank you very much.